Hi, I'm Dan, and welcome to Polar Currency and video number 13, and my second of the subseries What If? As a history wonk, I think a good what if scenario is who could have been on U.S. currency. If you've been watching my channel, I may have mentioned once or twice that the faces on U.S. currency have not changed since the summer of '29 when the new small size notes were released into circulation. This video will explore the what if someone else became part of U.S. paper currency history. First off, a little backstory. I know you're all shocked, but you also might need a whiteboard. When the new reduced Series 1928 small size notes came out, the U.S. Treasury decided to basically keep the same faces of the previous large size notes, but with a game of denominational musical chairs. Andrew Jackson had the most indirect path. Jackson was on the Series 1907 $5 legal tender note that was last issued between October 1927 and May 1928. At the same time, his portrait was also on the $10 Series 1914 Federal Reserve note that could have been issued as late as May of 1928. But Jackson got a promotion, moving up to the Series 1928 $20 Federal Reserve note and gold certificate. Jackson's promotion bumped Grover Cleveland off the Series 1914 $20 Federal Reserve note, giving Cleveland a big raise to the Series 1928 $1,000 Federal Reserve note and gold certificates. Cleveland's promotion was Alexander Hamilton's demotion, tumbling him off the Series 1918 $1,000 Federal Reserve note to the Series 1928 $10 Federal Reserve note and gold certificates, vacated by Jackson. Ulysses S Grant and Benjamin Franklin kept their places on the 1928 $50 and $100 Federal Reserve note and gold certificates. Although Franklin bumped Thomas Hart Benton off the Series 1922 $100 gold certificate. And you know what? Not one person at the time noticed or cared. In the middle of it all, William McKinley was quietly promoted from the Series 1902 $10 National Bank note to the Series 1928 $500 Federal Reserve note and gold certificates, kicking former Supreme Court Chief Justice John Marshall off the 1918 $500 Federal Reserve note. James Madison kept his place on the $5,000 Federal Reserve note and gold certificate. Salmon P. Chase maintained his position on the $10,000 Federal Reserve note, but bumped Jackson off the Series 1900 $10,000 gold certificate to appear on the new small-size Series 1928 gold certificate. Okay, has everyone got that? I told you you might need a whiteboard. You should be asking, Dan, what is your point? My point is there was a lot of transition with faces when the currency was reduced in size with the Series 1928, and this was nothing new. Since the beginning of the U.S. Treasury issuing paper currency in 1861, there has almost been 50 named individuals that have appeared on the front and or backs of U.S. banknotes. We learned in my video, Face of Currency, that there is only the 1866 legislation that regulates who is on U.S. currency, and that you have to be dead. There only appears to be guidelines that the person must be historically important, popular, and very recognizable by the public. But as you should know by now, the ultimate decision is up to the Secretary of the Treasury. It also happens to help that if a person dies at the right time, meaning close to a currency design change. There have been 4 times in almost the last century when there has been the death of a popular person and a currency design change providing the opportunity to place someone new on U.S. currency. But the characters were cast for the series in 1928. And no, I'm still not over the fact that Theodore Roosevelt didn't make the cut. I'll never get over it, so I'm just going to move on. The first chance for change could have been with the Series 1934 silver certificates and Federal Reserve notes, which did have a fairly significant design change over the Series 1928. The 30th President of the United States, Calvin Coolidge, just happened to die in early 1933. At least according to this very respectful headline from the Minneapolis Journal. So the timing would have worked for the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. Coolidge may not have been well known today and ranks in the bottom half of U.S. presidents, but when he left the White House in 1929, he was very popular. Coolidge was elected vice president in 1920 and became president when Warren G. Harding died in 1923. Coolidge was elected in his own right in 1924 and served as president through the prosperous Roaring Twenties with a conservative limited government ideology. Most likely his popularity would have led him to a second full term in 1928. Coolidge opted out of running again, remarking that 10 years as president would be longer than any other man has had it. Too long. Certainly a nod to George Washington's two-term limit precedent. You do have to give the man some foresight credit because that whole, Wall Street crash in 1929 followed by the Great Depression, he pretty much just let Herbert Hoover take the beating. With Coolidge's passing, whose spot on currency would he have taken? In my opinion, the choice could have been Ulysses S. Grant, the 18th President of the United States. The memory of Grant as the hero for the Union during the Civil War was fading after 5 decades removed from a questionable presidency. Maybe not his fault, but questionable nonetheless. At the time, the main workhorse for U.S. currency larger than $5 were the Federal Reserve banknotes. So my guess would have been the $50 Federal Reserve note. 2 portraits could have been used, Coolidge looking left surrounded by the traditional oval border, but this was 1934 when the $100,000 gold certificate was issued with a borderless Woodrow Wilson portrait. So maybe the portrait looking right. I happen to think it's Coolidge's better side, and I do care about these things. The next opportunity for a portrait change could have been when all notes got a design update with the series 1950 and 1953. There were a lot of changes between the last series 1934-35 Federal Reserve notes and silver certificates, along with the 1928 legal tender notes. The most visible changes was that the Treasury seal and alpha denomination were reduced in size. The series year is only displayed once now. The serial number font changed, and Washington, D.C. was moved above the Treasury seal. The legal tender note Treasury seal moved from left to right, the silver certificate numeric 5 went from blue ink to black ink, and the Federal Reserve note's Federal Reserve seal was redesigned and reduced in size, and the legal obligation was changed. There were a lot of changes, so why not change a portrait? My 2 cents? You knew I'd throw this cliche in at some point, is that the $2 legal tender could have been open to a change. Jefferson had the nickel. Who'd replace him, though? Well, what very famous, recognizable, and popular person died within recent memory? Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States, who died in April of 1945. Yeah, he's on the dime, but why does Jefferson, as a president, get to be on a coin and a banknote along with Franklin, Washington, and Lincoln? I admit Jefferson made a great real estate deal, but what else did he do as president? FDR is the only president elected to a 3rd and 4th term. Only 30% of all presidents have been elected to a 2nd term. Not an easy thing to do. And he also got re-elected during the Great Depression and a World War. There is a very interesting footnote related to FDR on paper currency. In 1948, legislation House Resolution 6512 was introduced in Congress by Representative Arthur G. Klein of New York to authorize an issuance of a $3 silver certificate bearing the portrait of Franklin D. Roosevelt. But no action was taken by the Treasury Department. The resolution was referred to the House Committee on Banking and Currency and was never heard from again. But it shows there was more than conversation about putting FDR on some circulating currency. I don't think anyone, especially the Treasury, thought it would be in the form of a $3 bill. FDR wasn't completely left off banknotes and securities. The $200 U.S. savings bond does bear his portrait. Thanks and credit go to Lee Loftus for his 2014 article in the Society of Paper Money Collectors Journal. The next possibility for a change could have been the Series 1966 $100 legal tender note. I'm completely dreaming here that the Treasury would allow a commemorative banknote. I know the entire commemorative thing is only for coins, but work with me here, people. From the start, the Series 1966 $100 legal tender note was intended to be a very specific, short-run, stop-gap series to replace all the $2 and $5 legal tender notes and removing them from circulation, circumventing an 1878 law. So why not make the specific banknote a commemorative by placing John F. Kennedy on it? You could leave Benjamin Franklin on the Federal Reserve note because the Series 1966 legal tender notes weren't printed to be circulated. The outpouring of emotions of the country were still very strong for JFK, especially with the recently completed Warren Commission at the time. And conspiracy theorists, let's just let that one go. For more information on the full story of the Series 1966 $100 legal tender note, check out my video Legal Tender Mysteries with the link below in the description. But JFK did get the half-dollar coin replacing Benjamin Franklin on the 50-cent piece 10 years early due to, guess what? Special congressional legislation. Although this was probably the one time it did make sense. The last real opportunity for a portrait change came in 2004. The short-run monochrome series were being replaced with the new colorized banknotes. Well, again, someone very recognizable and arguably popular recently died in 2004. The 40th President of the United States, Ronald Reagan. And as it happens, there was actual legislation proposing that Reagan be placed on the $10 bill. House Resolution 4528 was introduced in June of 2004 by U.S. Representative J.D. Hayworth of Arizona, but never received a vote. There was also a little bit of talk about putting Reagan on the dime, but that was quickly snuffed out by former First Lady Nancy Reagan not wanting to displace FDR. The idea of Reagan being placed on any currency isn't that much of a reach at that time. Alexander Hamilton's star had faded, and few people at the time could even tell you what he did, and many thought he was just another dead president. This, of course, was before the award-winning play Hamilton, which brought the former Founding Fathers' popularity back. There was also conversations at the time to place Martin Luther King on the $10 note, certainly a person deserving of such an honor. Which leads us to today and the question as to when Harriet Tubman may or may not replace Andrew Jackson on the $20 bill. This would be the first portrait change in a century. Remember, it was in 2015 when Treasury officials originally announced that Alexander Hamilton was to be replaced by a woman on the $10 denomination. Then, in the same year, the Broadway play Hamilton just happened to debut, and Alexander Hamilton's popularity soared, wreaking havoc on the Treasury's plan for the $10 bill, causing officials to pivot to the $20 bill. And that's where we stand today, wrapping up video number 13, What If Who? I appreciate your time, and if you like what you see, please hit that thumbs up button and feel free to leave a comment. We'll see you in 2 weeks, and thanks for checking in.